Story 1. The fuel gauge had been mocking me for the last 20 miles, needle hovering precariously over the E. Rain lashed against the windshield, a relentless icy drumming that matched the frantic beat of my own heart. I was on an unfamiliar stretch of highway, miles from anything I recognized, when the neon sign flickered into view like a dying ember. Gas. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a prickle of unease. The station was a scar on the otherwise unbroken darkness. A single buzzing fluorescent tube struggled to illuminate the cracked asphalt and two ancient rusty pumps. The building itself looked like an abandoned shack, its windows boarded up, a single grime-caked door the only visible entrance. No other cars, no signs of life beyond that stuttering light. I pulled up to the nearest pump, the engine's sudden silence amplifying the relentless drumming of the rain. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and stale gasoline. A shiver, unrelated to the cold, crawled up my spine. As I started to fill the tank, the door of the station creaked open. A man emerged, a silhouette against the dim interior light. He was tall, impossibly thin, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't look at me, but stared out into the rain, his head slightly tilted as if listening to a distant, inaudible whisper. His face, when he finally turned it towards me, was gaunt, chiseled by shadows. His eyes were the worst part. Dark, sunken hollows that seemed to absorb all light, yet held an unsettling glint that never quite met mine. "Just fill it, then." His voice was a dry, rasping whisper, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. It somehow managed to cut through the rain. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Yeah, please." Unleaded. He didn't acknowledge my answer, merely turned and shuffled back inside, leaving the door ajar. The silence he left behind was heavier, more oppressive than before. I finished pumping the gas, my hands cold and clumsy, eyes darting to the open door, half expecting him to reappear, half dreading it. Finally, the tank was full. I wrestled the nozzle back into its holder and headed for the entrance. The air inside the station was cold and still, smelling of dust and something metallic, an old, forgotten smell. The shelves were sparsely stocked with generic faded items, ancient bags of chips, unidentifiable canned goods, and a display of automotive fluids that looked like they'd been there since the last millennium. A small fly-specked counter stood in the middle, a relic of a forgotten era. The attendant was behind it, motionless, his gaunt face fixed on some point beyond me. I placed my credit card on the counter. He took it, his fingers skeletal and icy, and swiped it through a machine that looked like it belonged in a museum. The transaction took an eternity. The machine whirred and clicked, making sounds I hadn't heard since dial-up internet. My phone, clutched in my other hand, showed no service. Of course. I scanned the room, trying to avoid his unsettling gaze. In a dusty corner, I saw what looked like a collection of forgotten personal effects. A single worn shoe, a child's broken doll missing an eye, a tarnished silver locket. Each item felt like a fragment of a lost story, adding to the pervasive sense of melancholy and dread. A low, scraping sound came from the back room, a muffled dragging that made the hair on my arms stand on end. The attendant's head twitched almost imperceptibly, his eyes still fixed on nothing. He slid the receipt across the counter. "Have a safe journey," he rasped, the words feeling less like a wish and more like a warning. His gaze finally flickered, not to my eyes, but to a spot just over my left shoulder. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I grabbed the receipt and bolted, not even bothering to look back. I practically dove into my car, fumbling with the keys, starting the engine with a desperate roar. The headlights cut through the rain-streaked darkness, illuminating the station one last time. As I peeled out, gravel spitting from under my tires, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The attendant was still standing by the pumps, motionless, his gaunt frame silhouetted against the dim light of the station. He wasn't looking at the receding car. He was looking past it, his head tilted, his gaze fixed on something in the rain-slicked darkness beyond. Then, through the smudged glass of my rearview mirror, I saw it. a reflection in the car's interior. In the back seat, hunched against the passenger door, was a figure. Gaunt, silent. Its face, a pale, blank mask, was almost identical to the attendant's. Its dark, sunken eyes were fixed directly on the back of my head. It hadn't been there a second ago. The attendant at the pump slowly raised a hand, not waving, but pointing. Pointing, I realized with a sickening lurch, not at the road ahead but into my car. The radio, which had been off, suddenly crackled to life, filled with a burst of static, then a dry, rasping whisper that cut through the noise, chilling me to the bone. He knew you were coming. He always knows. I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering against my ribs, but when I spun around, the back seat was empty. Just the darkness and the lingering scent of stale gasoline. And for the rest of the night, as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling of those hollow eyes watching me from the darkness just behind my head. Waiting. Story 2. The gaslight had been on for the last 20 miles, a tiny amber beacon of my own stupidity. The highway was a black ribbon unspooling into a syrupy darkness, and the solitude, which had been peaceful an hour ago, was now beginning to feel predatory. Then I saw it, a lone, flickering sign that simply read, GAS. It looked less like a business, and more like a warning. I pulled off the highway onto a cracked asphalt lot. The station was a small, grimy box of light in the vast emptiness. Only one pump seemed to be working, its digital display a garbled mess of red lines. The main building was dark except for the cashier's booth, which cast a sickly yellow glow. As I got out, the night air felt heavy and cold. The usual highway hum was gone, replaced by an unnerving silence broken only by the chirping of unseen crickets and the crunch of my boots on gravel. I started pumping the gas, my eyes fixed on the man inside the booth. He was unnaturally still, just watching me. He wasn't old, maybe in his late 30s, with sunken eyes and skin stretched like old parchment over his cheekbones. He didn't blink. He just stared, his head tilted at a slight, curious angle. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I told myself I was just tired, spooked by the isolation. When the tank was full, I hurried inside to pay. The bell above the door didn't jingle. It let out a dull, rusty clank. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale coffee and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. "Just the gas on pump 3, I said, my voice sounding thin. The man didn't respond. He simply extended a trembling hand for my credit card. His gaze flickered from my face, over my shoulder, and out toward my car, then back again. It wasn't a casual glance. It was focused, intense, as if he were tracking something. He swiped the card. Once, twice. His knuckles were white where he gripped the plastic. "Machines acting up," he mumbled, his voice a dry rasp. He never broke eye contact with the darkness behind me. "Can you just try it again?" I asked, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. I just wanted out. The feeling of being watched was no longer just a feeling. It was a physical pressure on my skin. He shook his head slowly, deliberately. "No. You can't go yet." The ice in my stomach shattered into a million sharp pieces of panic. This was it. This is how the stories always start. The creepy attendant, the broken machine, the isolated location. "Look, I have cash," I said, fumbling in my wallet and throwing a 50 on the counter. "Keep the change. I have to go." As I turned to leave, his hand shot out and gripped my wrist. His touch was shockingly cold, like a corpse's. I flinched, trying to pull away, but his grip was like iron. He leaned forward, his stale breath washing over me. He whispered, so low I could barely hear it. "Please, don't make a sound. You can't leave with him." My blood ran cold. Him? He was talking about himself in the third person. He was completely unhinged. This was his plan all along. to trap me here. Adrenaline surged through me. I yanked my arm free with all my might, stumbled backward, and bolted out the door. I didn't dare look back. I scrambled into my car, the keys fumbling in my shaking hands. I jammed the key in the ignition and slammed the locks down. The engine roared to life. I glanced back at the station one last time, ready to peel out of there. The attendant was standing in the doorway, framed by that sick yellow light. He wasn't chasing me. He wasn't even angry. His face was a mask of pure, abject terror, his hands pressed against the glass as if he were the one in a cage. He looked horrified for me. Confused, I instinctively checked my rearview mirror to start backing up. And my world stopped. It wasn't the empty back seat I expected to see. A pair of eyes stared back at me from the deep shadows behind the passenger seat. They were dark, patient, and they had been there the whole time. The attendant hadn't been staring at my car. He had been staring at the man hidden inside it. The cryptic warnings, the shaking hands, his fear. It wasn't a threat. It was a desperate, failed attempt to save me. He hadn't been trying to keep me in the store. He was trying to keep me from getting back in my car. A low, calm voice emerged from the darkness behind me. A voice that would haunt my nightmares for whatever short time I had left. "Drive," it whispered. "And don't even think about screaming."